Hey, what's going on? It's your boy Knock Real. I'll try to hold on to this microphone, get a little close to my mouth here because it's very windy out here today. Wind is really whipping here on the beach. It kind of gets like that. I don't know why. It just all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it just becomes really, really windy here. So, I wanted to talk a little bit about purpose, knowing what your goals are, being willing to sacrifice for your goals and the things that you want. Um, Moving here to Rio, it took a lot of sacrifice for me to come out here, but I definitely understood exactly what my objectives were. I understood the reason why. The number one reason why is time, because in the States, you're working and you're bogged down with all of these things. You got bills to pay, and you're worried about the car note and the mortgage or the rent, and trying to, keep food on the table, keep the roof over your head and all that. And it's a very expensive process to kind of do that. So um, I understood that, working, the number of hours I was working, it wasn't going to allow me to have time to pursue the dreams that I had, to get back into things like music, to pursue my forex company the way that I wanted to. I needed to be able to do these things basically on a full-time basis and have free time to actually deal with my customers properly, work with my accounts properly, work on music. So part of the decision of me moving here to Rio was so that I could have time to pursue those dreams without having the expenses that I had in the United States. So, coming here, it's a lot cheaper to live. All the expenses and everything are a lot cheaper. There's ways to do it where you can spend a minimal amount of money and then you can maximize your time in your other activities, endeavors. So that's kind of where I am. I can't say that the landing was totally smooth all the time, but I'm here almost 4 years later. I'm here. I will say 3.5 years at this point. And I'm still here. And the reason being because I had the time to be able to kind of sort things out, kind of get the lay of the land. I didn't have to make, thousands upon thousands of dollars every single month just to survive. I could do it with hundreds of dollars a month and I could survive here. So I just found my way. So you have to find your purpose. You have to find what your motivation is, and then ask yourself what you're willing to do. What are you willing to do? What are you willing to sacrifice to get what you need? And what are you willing to sacrifice to get the experiences you want in your life, to have the lifestyle that you want to live? What are you really willing to do to get that? And so, for me, it was just a point where I already wanted to live overseas anyway. I just wanted the experience meeting, people, dealing with the different cultures, and just finding out how people live. I hated going on vacation because I didn't want to go for like a month or a week or whatever and just not know really. I felt like I didn't know anything about the place where I was at. So, being able to actually live in a place, you really get a lay of the land. You get to make friends. You get to figure out, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are. You figure out how to have an income and to support yourself while you're traveling. So, getting into that world, I just realized, hey, this is something I'm willing to sacrifice for. And, for come hella high water or, for broke, I'm here, and I'm going to do my thing. So, and it's been paying off. So, you have to understand what it is, what your why is. Why do you want to be independent? Why do you want to travel? Why do you want to be a producer of music? Why do you want to be an artist of, music, or maybe a design artist? Why do you want to do those things? And all of those things require sacrifice at some point in time. And so be willing to sacrifice, write down what your goals are. If you write down what your goals are, you'll never go wrong. Most of the time when you write down your goals, they tend to come true. You start to see them in real life. I remember, as a young family man, I just had gotten married and all that. I kind of got into music, had never been to a studio before. I went to a studio out there in Winter Park, Florida, called Audio Playground. My guy, Joe, he was great. This guy was a sound designer, engineer. He had an actual museum in the studio as well, like a real life museum with synths from, every record you can think of. If he found it, he would buy it. He'd travel all over the country, buy those synths, and then if they weren't working, he could actually take them apart, fix them, put them back together, make sure they worked. So this guy had a super wealth of knowledge. And so he's the one who taught me engineering, getting on the board, understanding the board and what's happening, working with dope equipment. I mean, he had everything known to man, as far as equipment wise. He had 3 rooms. He had a Trident board, a 48 track Trident board in the A room. The B room was a digital room, which wasn't really big back then. We're talking about the early 90s. That was like pretty much state of the art. He had a digital room. And then he had the C room, which was the small room. The small room was like some synths and a board, and you can record MIDI stuff in there and all that stuff. And it was really, really, really cool. So, I got to work in all the different rooms and just learn from him. And so that's kind of where my experience came from. That's, but when I didn't, he had all the equipment, I didn't have it. So, and I couldn't pay to go in there like every single week. So, I would sit at home, I'd get Mix Magazine, Recording Magazine. I'd read them cover to cover multiple times, whenever they would come out, because I wanted to know everything about mixing, engineering, and recording. And then what I would do is I'd take some of those magazines, cut equipment out. I'd learn what the inputs and outputs were on the back. I'd paste them to a sheet of paper like a kid and draw lines, for the wires. Like, okay, this is what you hook up here. This is the kind of cable you need for this. That's the kind of cable you need for that. So when it came time for me, I built a little studio. I had a little 8-track Tascam or something like that. It was a tape machine, Tascam, like with actual cassette tape. I did my first session with my boy David. I put an ad in the paper or something like that in this little weekly paper or whatever. Homeboy called, and we've been friends ever since. Like, I haven't seen him in a while, but we've been friends ever since. So, that friendship lasts a long time. But he was my very first customer. He paid me to come record at my house, and I had a janky booth and all that kind of stuff. It just wasn't a great setup, but it worked, so I'm holding this a little bit closer so I can kind of steady it a little bit, because I think I'm moving around a little bit too much here. So, but it did work. It worked for us to record a little session or whatever. And then I was going to Joe, so I was learning all the way. But by all of that practice, when it came time for me to open up actual little studios, I was able to buy equipment, route it up and everything pretty easily, be knowledgeable about it. If something happened during the session, I could fix it. I learned how to build computers. Before that, I was definitely afraid of computers. I don't know why, but I just was. I went from not knowing anything about computers to actually like pulling apart my motherboard and CPUs and stuff and trading those out every 6 months, rebuilding my computers in the studio and all that stuff by myself. So, I made a lot of sacrifice. I spent, money, I spent time, but it was a good 10-year process before I actually had my studio on Westmoreland Drive, called Ruckus Entertainment, in Orlando. And I ran that for 5 years, basically full time. I used to work for Morgan Stanley or whatever, and in the brokerage industry, I was a stock trader at one time and all that stuff. That was kind of my career. And when I got laid off from Morgan Stanley, they kind of closed the doors at the office that I was working at. I just went for it. I was like, hey, I'm ready. I've been buying equipment and everything. I'm ready. So, but it was 10 years at that point in time before I did that. And I ended up with 150 regular clients coming through, and I just knew how to work. And I was actually able to hire students graduating from Full Sail to come in. I had somebody reach out to me maybe like 2 years ago. He's like, yo, do you remember me? You were like the first person who ever paid me to do a studio session. I was like, really? And I was like that. I was like, I don't expect you to come here and work for free. Like you go in these other studios, they're going to give you an internship. You're going to get coffee and stuff for free. But I was kind of like, no, come here and get paid. Do sessions with my clients and get paid, so you know what that feels like, so that you're not a slave to me. You know what I'm saying? You're pulling your weight and you want to work because you're getting paid. So that was kind of like my sacrifice and my entry into the industry. So I learned real quick why I wanted to do it. It just was a love of mine, but I had to make a lot of sacrifice, and even coming here to Brazil was a lot of sacrifice for me. So I got to get off here because I only got about 20 seconds left to shoot this, because my phone drops at 10. But yeah, that's pretty much what my history has been and why I've been in the industry. So I'm going to jump off here, and I'll probably do a part 2 in a little bit and talk to you more, okay? Talk to you soon. Peace.